A few weeks ago, I started to have a toothache. It wasn't unbearable at first, but with time it became more annoying. Hot and cold foods gradually became impossible to eat. Biting on anything too hard would send waves of sharp pain upward into my jaw. Now, I've always disliked visiting the dentist, and over the years, I'll admit I don't see them that often. Only when it becomes an emergency do I drag myself in for a checkup. I didn't feel like it was at that stage yet, despite the pain. Instead, I found myself becoming more and more obsessed with my tooth. I would wiggle it with my tongue and tug at it lightly with my fingers just to see how loose it was. The idea came to me that if I could get it out myself, I wouldn't have to go into the dentist, and so that became my new life's mission. Now, pulling your own tooth isn't easy. Every now and then I would get up the courage to give it a good yank, only to have nothing happen. It was apparently still too firmly attached. Eventually, I found it difficult to eat anything that wasn't soup, so I put up with the pain for a few more days, and after that, then decided enough was enough. Took a pair of pliers from the shed and cleaned them well. I then sat with these pliers beside me in the bathroom for hours, gathering the courage to actually just rip it out. Repeatedly, I told myself it needed to be done here and now, or I needed to go to the dentist. I procrastinated long enough to get angry with myself. It was just a loose, rotted tooth. Just pull it, I told myself. And in a moment of rage-fueled determination, I reached into my mouth and clamped the pliers around my tooth. At the count of 3, I ripped my tooth out. It dislodged with a wet slop and some horrific cracking sounds. Blood ran freely, and I looked like someone had punched a tooth out rather than pulled it out. Hurriedly, I stuffed some cotton balls up into the hole to stop the bleeding. I want to say there was instant relief from the pain, but the reality is that it hurt at least 4 times worse now. The bleeding seemed to go on forever as I agonized. I took painkillers, but they barely dulled it. Eventually, I took something a little stronger for the pain and passed out. When I woke up, things were a little better. The searing pain was now a dull ache, and the bleeding seemed to have stopped, though my saliva was still tinted red. I went about my day as normal. I knew I shouldn't poke the fresh hole too much, so I mostly left it alone. Though over the next few days, it was irritating in a new way. Sure, not painful to eat, but it sort of tickled me. Occasionally, it almost felt as though something was moving in the hole. When I touched it with my tongue, I felt the squishy blood clot, and I hurt my tongue on something sharp. Probably a piece of bone, I assumed. That was to be expected, but I was worried about developing a dry socket or something. After about a week, things didn't improve. In fact, they worsened. The sensation that something was wriggling in the hole socket was almost constant, and it was driving me mad. Finally, I decided to see if I could see anything in the hole. Maybe a stray piece of food that had lodged itself in there or something. Using my phone as a light, I stood in front of the mirror and tried to look into my mouth. Almost immediately, I saw it. Something black was dangling down from the hole. The dead nerve ending, I thought, and in complete disgust, I made the worst decision of my life. I reached for the tweezers to pull it out. Grabbing it was fairly easy, but when I pulled it, pain erupted upwards into my sinuses. Shocked, I dropped the tweezers before I could look at what I had pulled out, and it took me a moment to regather myself enough to find the piece I had dropped. Through a haze of pain, I looked at the slim black item. It wasn't a nerve. It was oddly shaped, unmoving, and bent slightly. A worm? No. Worse. A leg. It was the wet, black, hairy leg of a spider. Every decision I had made from that moment onward was done in frantic panic. I ran straight to my liquor cabinet and picked out the highest alcohol content drink I could grab within 3 seconds or less. It was vodka. Good enough. I drank it straight from the bottle and filled my mouth. Ugh. It burned my tongue, but I held the liquid there until I could feel the thing in my tooth hole writhing. It was excruciating. It felt like it was trying to dig its way out of my mouth. I staggered back to the bathroom. My eyes were watering and my nose was starting to drip. I could feel something moving inside my face, and when I looked in the mirror, I could see the tiniest baby spiders coming out of my nose and left eye. They wriggled their way out, escaping with the liquid coming out of my sinuses. When I spat out the vodka, it was dyed red with blood, and the vile black mass of a spider came with it. In the sink, it twitched and jerked about as the alcohol burned it. I was surprised it was still alive and horrified by how big it was. I rinsed with the vodka repeatedly. Baby spiders came out with every cycle, and once I had emptied the bottle, I switched to water. Eventually, no more of the revolting creatures were visible in my spit. My eyes and nose gradually stopped watering. I felt like I had purged well enough that none were left, but I still felt sick to my stomach. I sat on the floor and cried alone for some time. The experience was the most traumatic thing I have ever been through.